Yes, Maharaj. Okay. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the discussion on the great master Sri Ramakrishna. It's called Leela Prasanga, written by Shardanandaji Maharaj. So we were in the beginning discussing about the introduction to the divine incarnation's life of sadhana or spiritual practice as a spiritual practitioner. So now we are going deeper and deeper into that aspect of the life. Let us also now again go back and read all those things. So, what is the advantage of doing all these things? Why should we undergo all these disciplines? I think Shardanandaji Maharaj himself will clear in this session itself. We shall see that. But now let us go to the discussion and come to the answer. Why should we undergo all these things? The more we study, the more we go deeper into these aspects. What are the advantage? We'll come to know now. So now we will go back a little with yesterday's discussion so that we will get a link. Otherwise, directly if you go to the paragraph, you may not understand why Shardanandaji Maharaj has raked up this matter. So we'll go back a little so that you will get the continuity. Attitude of a sadhaka, spiritual practitioner, or the spiritual aspirant in incarnations. It becomes very clear from a study of human nature that the higher a man's mind ascends, the more intensely do the subtle desires pain him. Yesterday we read this. The higher a man descends, even the smallest of things will pain him. The more intensely do the subtle desires pain him. One who has committed thefts, uttered falsehoods, or indulged in licentiousness innumerable times is not much pained by repeating those actions. But an honest and high-minded man considers himself guilty and becomes distressed even at the thought of such things. I will give you an example from a Buddhist story. There was a Buddhist monk who was traveling through the forest alone. He came to the bank of a pond or a lake, and he was sitting there on the bank of the pond, maybe under the shade of the tree, and he was enjoying the reflection of everything in that pond or lake. So the water body contained lot of lotuses and lilies, lot of flowers. It will be very beautiful. You should see that crimson colored lotuses and white colored lilies and lotuses. So beautiful. So now when he was enjoying that lotuses and lilies and flowers and all the reflection of the sky and that greenery around, he thought, let me pull one of the beautiful lotus. I'm just seeing the beauty. Let me smell the fragrance of that lotus. Fragrance of the lotus is also very good. So I want to smell it. Now he didn't pluck it. He didn't cut the lily. He just went near the pond, pulled a flower, and started inhaling that aroma or that fragrance which was around that flower. But even while he was in that process, he had not completely inhaled that fragrance or scent, beautiful scent of that lotus. Suddenly, a sound came. Nobody was seen. It was a voice without form. Suddenly, the sound told, "Hey, thief of the smell. Hey, who is that thief of the smell? Who is stealing that smell?" Then the monk was flabbergasted. He was very taken aback. What is this? Where do I hear the sound from? Who is calling me a thief? I'm a monk. I've given up everything. So, okay, he again didn't go to smell that fragrance when he was called a thief of the smell and sat back and he was just observing. At the time, he saw one hunter. You know, hunters in olden days, quite strong. He had all the arrow and bow and other implements, even some knife and sword. Then he came, he jumped into that pond or lake. Then he disturbed the lake like anything, everything. He cut off so much, he almost killed so many lotus or lily plants. He cut off so many flowers to take it to the house. He enjoyed, he just, what do you call, fell into that like a beast. And he rolled in that water and killed so much of plants. He caught so many fish and carried away. And when that hunter was doing all these things, no sound came. Then, okay, again, he thought of maybe it was my imagination or hallucination. That hunter has gone. Let me again try to smell the flower. Again, he went near the one of the lotus flower. He didn't cut it. You should notice that he didn't disturb any of the plants there, the lily or lotus in that lake. Then he pulled near him another lotus and then wanted to smell. The moment he was about to smell, again the sound came. Hey, thief of the smell. Then he was taken aback. What is this? That fellow, the hunter, jumped into the lake. He disturbed the lake. He killed so many fishes. He killed so many plants, lotus and lily plants in his movement like a beast there. And then he also cut off hundreds of lotuses there and took away. And I didn't harm anything. I didn't even get into the water. I didn't trouble any of the fishes, nor did I cut off any plants. But I was just very carefully going towards the one of the lotuses, the flower, and then wanted to smell it. That's all. I didn't even cut that flower. But I am just trying to take that fragrance, and you're calling me a thief. Who is that? You dare to call me a thief? Then that person or that voice without form, maybe a demigod or a, what do you call, they call Gandharva. Then he repeated again, see, you are a monk. And that person was a hunter. He's at the lower state of the evolution. He doesn't know anything. You are very sensitive, gone forward in spiritual life. For you, even to take that scent is prohibited to enjoy these sense objects of the world. You are a man of self-control, control of the regulating your senses and regulating your mind. Mano nigraha, indriya nigraha. So for you, even to inhale that fragrance, because you have given up everything, your only idea is to enjoy the bliss of the Lord. This sense objects and sense things are to be avoided by you as a monk. So even if you take that fragrance, you are a thief of the smell. But that hunter is at the very, very lower state of evolution. So even if he does a lot of all these things, he's just like an animal, any other animal. Suppose the elephant comes into the lake and disturbs. Nobody will tell the elephant that it's a thief or it has destroyed something, ahimsa and all those things. It's only for the higher evolutes. The higher the human being goes up in the strata of spiritual life, then he becomes more subtler and subtler and subtler. That's why now you can see why Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling about Sri Ramakrishna. It becomes very clear from the study of human nature that higher a man's mind ascends, the more intensely do the subtle desire pain him. One who has committed thefts, uttered falsehoods, or indulged in licentiousness innumerable times is not much pained by repeating those actions, but an honest and high minded man considers himself guilty and becomes distressed even at the thought of such things. Although incarnations of God are often seen to refrain from gross worldly enjoyments all their lives, they too have to fight with the subtle desires of their minds, but with one difference. What is the difference? Unlike our hardened minds, their pure and sensitive minds feels, as justified by themselves, a terrible anguish, a hundredfold more intense than ours at the slightest awakening of these subtle desires within. How can we, therefore, regard their struggles to withdraw their senses from sights, tastes, and other sense faculties as faint? How can you? Let me quote you words of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita about this. So then, if it comes from the sacred mouth of Lord Krishna, you will enjoy it much more, or you will understand it. What did Lord Krishna tell in Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter? Just in the last class and the other last class, even now, I'm discussing the same thing. And what is that? Lord Krishna is telling in the 58th verse, Yada samharate chayam kurmonganiva sarvashaha indriyan indriyartebhya tasya pragna pratishtita. When also, like the tortoise, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, the man of realization, that is man of perfect wisdom, sthita pragna, when also like drawing its limbs, one can completely withdraw the senses from their sense objects, his or her wisdom becomes steady. Then only that person whom is trying to become perfect, is trying to realize himself. So he becomes Sthita Pragna when he can withdraw all the senses from the sense objects and tuck it inside and keeps it in his own self, that is Atman. We have studied the tortoise. Whenever its senses some trouble outside, it withdraws itself within its shell and nothing can harm it there. So likewise here, when Ramakrishna was leading this spiritual life, so even the smallest things like sense enjoyments, which would be detrimental to spiritual life, comes to him, that would pain him and he would withdraw that mind. It would cause pain, intense pain. So as we told, as we discussed that, as you become subtler and subtler, even the smallest thing pains you much. But as you go down in the state of evolution, even the worst of the things will not pain you much. You will be, even the worst of the things when you commit, you don't feel that guilt conscience will not be there. You'll be even sometimes enjoying those guilts or the mistakes which you have committed. So going forward, let us see what is happening perhaps after all this reading. Even now, some readers acquainted with the scriptures, those who have studied Shankaracharya's commentaries, who are acquainted with the scriptures may say, but how can I accept, that is Shardanandaji Maharaj's argument, how can I accept what you say? Don't you see what Shankaracharya, the paragon of monoism means? Advaita. What is Advaita? Advaita. Means no. Dvaita means two. There is only one. And what is that? You can't even tell what is that. You can't even tell one. Because if you tell one, then automatically the idea of two or many will come. So that's why the word monoism means Advaita. In English, they are told monoism. But in Sanskrit, Dvaita means not two, no two. That's all. That means you can't tell what it is. So when it is told by the paragon of this Advaita Shankaracharya, he says in the beginning of his commentary on the Gita regarding the birth and assumption of the human body on the part of Sri Krishna, he says there, God eternally free, God is eternally free, eternally awake, and eternally pure in nature, the controller of all living beings, devoid of birth, etc., is born as it were. He uses the word as it were. He is possessed of a body as it were through Maya. With the help of the Maya, he possessed the body as it were. So he takes this human body in the Maya, is born as it were, possesses the body as it were, with his own power, that is Maya, in order to do good to humanity. So in order to do good to humanity also, should we take it like that? When Shankara himself says so, how does your statement hold good? When Shankaracharya is telling that the Lord is taking the body, is assuming all these human qualities as it were with the help of the Maya, how can you tell something which is contrary when Shankaracharya himself says so? How does your statement hold good? Without contradicting Shankara, now Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, without contradicting Shankaracharya, we say that we still have sufficient reason to support our argument. What is that? In order to understand Shankaracharya, we must remember one thing. Just as it regards God's possession of name and form as apparent, so does he regard our possessions of them, that is name and form, our possession, jivas, we living beings, the possession of this name and form. Also, Shankaracharya tells that they are equally false. Not only the name and form of the avatar Purushas and the Ishvara is false according to Shankara, even our assumption of this body, name and form, is equally false according to Shankara. He regards the whole universe as a false superimposition on the reality of Brahman. He regards that this whole creation is not creation. The word creation cannot be used. What the scriptures used is projection. What? From the Lord, infinite Lord, Nirakar, Nirguna, formless, attributeless, Brahman, that Lord, consciousnness. So it's a projection, that's all. It's not creation. Apparently it comes and goes away, just like the ocean, if it is considered as the Parabrahman, so many waves comes and goes. So all this creation and everything is just like that wave coming from the ocean. Or the ocean is real, but as waves, it comes and goes, it is not real. So likewise, Parabrahma Swarupa is the only reality. All these waves coming up, the projections coming up and going, our creation, we living, all these things are false. They come and go. That is what the scriptures tell. So here, Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, he regards, who is that? Shankaracharya, the paragon of monoism, Advaita. He regards the whole universe as a false superimposition on the reality of Brahman and does not admit its real existence. Sri Shankaracharya's commentary on Adhyasa in the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. In the Brahma Sutra Bhashya, Shankaracharya's Adhyasa Bhashya is to be studied, then you will understand. Understand the argument of Shankaracharya. That is what Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling. Go and read that. So what is given there? Therefore, his conclusion will be understood if we take both these statements together. If you tell the name and form and the assumption of the body by the Avatar Purusha is only as it were apparent, then we should also take that our assumption of this body, name and form, is also unreal. If the whole creation is unreal, is a projection on Parabrahma Swarupa, then do you think your body and your pain and other things are also real? It's unreal. We are not ready to take that. We think that, oh, God has given all the pains. We will be shouting and fretting and fuming and blaming so many people, thinking that they are real. But when it comes to Avatara, we quote Shankaracharya and tells that all that is unreal. Then you have to take your presence, you are telling your body also unreal from the same standpoint of view. So if you argue like that way, you are saying, you are taking up the body, your pains, your feelings are also unreal then, compared from that statement. Therefore, his conclusion will be understood. Whose conclusion? Shankaracharya's conclusion will be understood if we take both these statements together. We have to take both together. You can't take one and leave the other. There is a maxim, there is a nyaya in our Nyaya Shastras. What is that? What is that maxim? Ardhajarati Nyaya. What is that Ardhajarati Nyaya? A person took one egg and half the egg he wanted to prepare. The maxim tells he wanted to prepare something from half the egg, and other half he wanted to hatch it and make a chicken. It can't be done. So Ardhajarati Nyaya means he wanted to take one egg out of that. He wants to break and the inner thing, substance, half of that egg he wants to make some substance out of it, maybe omelette or something, whatever, we do not know. And other half of the egg, he wants to hatch the chick. Can it happen? Either you have to take the whole of the egg and prepare something out of it, or you have to take whole of the egg and make a chick, hatch a chick out of it. You can't take half and half. Likewise, here too, you can't take only those things, those argument of Shankaracharya for the Avatar Purusha only, incarnation. And you will think that all your pain, all the feelings you are having is real. Then you go and cry and cry and cry. So many people will be telling, oh, I've got so much of difficulty. Oh, I've got, those people pained me, troubled me. This God pained me, troubled me. These were all the troubles. And we go on thinking of the past and cry and cry. And we'll be thinking of the future and cry and be worried and go into the state of stress and depression. Is that real then? Then that is also unreal. Why can't we take that as unreal and be happy, immersed in Brahman? We don't do that. We take only those things wherever we want. We quote everything out of context. So Shankaracharya is very nice. Our Shardanandaji Maharaj is very nicely taking. You have to accept both. Therefore, his conclusion, that is Shankaracharya's conclusion, will be understood if we take both these statements together. You can't take half and half. It is not. So from this, you have to understand, when anything, difficulty comes in your life, when you are in trouble, if you feel that the life you have underwent now had so many problems, so many unfulfilled desires, and you are in pain, how should you consider from the standpoint of Shankaracharya's this thing? This world is mithya. All the happening is mithya. Only the Lord is the satya. Lord is the truth. Then forget everything. Be happy. Live in the present. Always immerse in Parabrahma Swarupa. Don't be. Do you think then this coronavirus is real? If the whole projection of this earth and creation is unreal, it is Maya, Mithya, it's a dream, then do you think the fear of coronavirus, the coronavirus trying to kill us, put us into trouble, all the fear, what will happen to the husband, wife and children, father, mother, all our kith and kin, what is going to happen in future, all that fear, is it then real? No, it is unreal, as this creation is unreal according to Advaita. So now you can be happy in Atman. You take all the precautions, don't be afraid, don't be anxious. So how nicely you can use the, the great statements of Advaita and be happy and be without fear. You can become fearless by these beautiful things. So we can put it into practice. What is the use of the study of all these scriptures? This way we have to use it for our daily practices and be tension free. We can be always happy, enjoying this mithya. This is unreal. Then why should I worry, break my head for the unreal thing? Be happy, immersed in Brahman. The Lord is the only reality. Okay. It is not Shankaracharya's intention that we should regard the incarnation's embodiment and experience of pain and pleasure as a false appearance and regard such thing on our part alone is real. Both are unreal or both are real. If we accept our own feelings and perceptions as real, we must accept those of an incarnation also as real. What a wonderful argument. Therefore, what we have said before still stands. This will be clearly understood if we discuss it from another standpoint. What is that another standpoint? The scriptures say that two distinct conceptions of the world arise in us when we look at it from the two planes of consciousness. So the scripture says that two different conceptions of the world arise in us when we look at it from the two planes of consciousness. What is that two planes of consciousness? The non-dual. What is that non-dual? Advaita, monoism. And dual. What is that dual? Dvaita. That God is separate. then this world is separate, and the living beings, the environment is separate. What does Advaita tells? No, there is no separate existence. God alone is true. All that living beings, so many living beings, and all this nature, external nature, Maya, and the what do you call other living beings, and God, they are one and the same. There is no separate existence. It's only one. God alone exists. So that is Advaita. So these two plane of consciousness, the non-dual and the dual, if we ascend to the former plane and try to understand to what extent the things we call the universe is real, we get the immediate knowledge that it does not exist and has never existed from Advaita point of Advaita, non-dual consciousness. There's nothing but the reality of Brahman. There is only God. There is only Brahman. The reality of Brahman only exists. The rest, just like the ocean only exists, the waves come and go. It doesn't have any existence. So one only without a second exists. That is Parabrahma Swarupa, God, Paramatman. While if we look at it from the dual plane, the Dvaita, the world with the aggregate of various names and forms appears to be real and eternally existent, even as it is now with us ordinary human beings. So if you look at it from this plane, it exists and all the things, pain, everything exists. Although possessed of the body, the incarnations and the persons liberated in life, devoid of body consciousness. What is this? People who are devoid of body consciousness even within life, that is called Jivan Mukta, or we were discussing just now, Sita Pragna, man of perfection, and the Avatar Purushas. So, although possessed of bodies, the incarnations and the persons liberated in life, Jivan Muktas, or what you call the Ishvara Kotis, the saints and sages who have realized the temporariness of this world and realized the permanence of God about them. So, therefore, they have the conviction, even when they live in the plane of duality, that the world is unreal like a dream. So, although possessed of bodies, the incarnations and the persons liberated in life, devoid of body consciousness, as they are, dwell very often in the non-dual plane of consciousness. Therefore, they have the conviction, even when they live in the plane of duality, that the world is unreal like a dream. Though compared with the waking state, a dream is known as unreal. The dream of a dreamer at the time of dreaming cannot be called absolutely unreal. Similarly, you may be noting that when you are in the dream, you'll be chased by a tiger or a lion, then you go on running and running and running, then about the lion is to attack you and kill you, tear you into pieces. Then suddenly you wake up. Even after waking, then your heart will be palpitating, will be shivering, you will be sweating. Though now you have come to know it is dream, but still your body will be palpitating, you'll be sweating, you'll be in fear. So that unreality of the dream will be transferred even in the waking state. If such is the case, when you are in the dream, how real that will be. Likewise, even though this world is unreal, like a dream, but when you are in the dream is real. That's what here Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling. It looks unreal. It looks real. The dream looks real until you are in the dream state. Only when you wake up to the reality, that is realization of God and Parabrahman, then only you can feel the unrealness of the dream state or whatever we are in this waking state. So until then, it is all real. So here Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, therefore, they have the conviction, even when they live in the plane of duality, that the world is unreal like a dream. Though compared with the waking state, a dream is known as unreal. The dream of the dreamer at the time of dreaming cannot be called absolutely unreal. Similarly, compared with the state of their absorption in Brahman, the semblance of the world in the minds of the incarnations and persons liberated in life is unreal. But when they are not in samadhi, when they have the consciousness of the body, when they are not in samadhi, it cannot be regarded as absolutely unreal. So now all these arguments, it's very so threadbare and it is so subtle. Now early in the morning, when you come up after waking up from the sleep, you may be feeling it very tough, but you have to go deeper and deeper and understand all those things that will help us. Why we are doing all these things, why we are thinking so deeply, why are we getting confused with all this argumentation. So Shardanandaji Maharaj will tell all that in the future. When we go to the proper life, he will tell that. So let us see what Shardanandaji wants to tell in this introduction, attitude of a sadhaka and sadhaka in incarnations. Just as a thing called the world is seen in two different ways from two above mentioned planes, so also a particular person in it is seen as two different beings from those two planes of consciousness. Seen from the plane of duality, he is known as a man in worldly bondage, and seen from the infinite non-dual plane as Brahman, eternally free and eternally pure. So incarnation, seen from this plane of consciousness, that is duality, Dvaita, then he is a human being like us with all the worldly bondage. He is known as a man in worldly bondage and seen from the, but if he is seen from the infinite non-dual plane as Brahman, eternally free and eternally pure, then that is another state. The infinite non-dual plane is the highest region in the realm of ideas. The human mind passes through higher and higher planes of consciousness before it reaches that non-dual state, non-dual plane, which is the goal. That is our goal. We all have to go to that. While the mind of the aspirant ascends to those higher and higher regions, both the universe and a particular individual is in it assumes for him different forms, and his previous conception of them change in various ways. For example, to him, the world then seems to be made up of ideas only, and a particular individual appears to be separate from the body and endowed with extraordinary powers, or made up of mind or of the light celestial. So when he is in the samadhi, he can see all these things at the higher plane of consciousness. When he takes up the aspect of the body, takes up this ordinary thing, he will be just like a human being with all the limitations. So that's what Shardanandaji Maharaj is trying to tell. So he can switch over, come from this plane to the other plane. He can go to the higher plane. He can come to this lower plane, then feel everything, be like human beings. Then only he can understand what are the sorrows and problems. Seen from that higher planes, all this is unreal. Then where is the question of understanding you? That's why he has to come down, understand the feelings, feel himself the pain. Then only he will understand our pain and try to liberate us. Then only he gets the compassion, comparing his own higher self, the enjoyment there, and the people here adopting all these things and being in trouble. Then he can help us to overcome this and go towards that infinite bliss. That is the idea. Now we shall stop our very tough discussion of this Advaita, monoism, two plane of consciousness, all those things is very tough. So even then, we have to understand, since it is tough, we cannot go away from this discussion. We have to understand as you go on. Because I have read this so many times, I have understood this Advaita to some extent, I can enjoy it. But you in the beginning, it will be a little monotony, but you have to undergo that. Then only your mind will become subtler and subtler. In such a way, it becomes sharpened to understand the higher aspect of life. So we have to understand this, study this. Okay, now we will come to the so-called simpler thing, the life of Sri Ramakrishna. So we may think it is simpler, but let's see how tough it is. Yeah, yesterday we were discussing about the sadhana, the life of sadhana. Chronologically, Shardanandaji Maharaj was dividing it into 4 parts. Then it started at that year for 12 years. Sri Ramakrishna did this sadhana 1 year after the temple was consecrated, then up to 1867. So from 1864 to 1867. So the first thing we saw, first there are 4 parts from 1856 to 1859. So he divided that period, 12 years of sadhana, into 4 parts, and everything chronologically he will take us through. So we did that discussion yesterday. Now we will go to that first part of the sadhana in the 12 years. We see that the only external help he got at the beginning of his sadhana, beginning of his sadhana was the initiation he had from Sri Kenaram Bhattacharya. So that Kenaram Bhattacharya, who had gone forward in the Tantra worship or the Divine Mother Shakti worship, so he gave the mantra and prepared him for that going forward and doing puja. That's all. That is the only help he has got, nothing else. Sri Ramakrishna has got no help other than this beginning of the sadhana. He straight away proceeded to practice the discipline, the extreme eagerness of his heart, Vyakulata, for the realization of God was his main support during that period. That's why Ramakrishna used to tell, whichever path you may take up, go towards God. The important thing is not the path or which deity you have chosen or who is your guru. That is not very, very important. The important thing is what is your attitude? What is your intensity? What is your sincerity? What is your eagerness, Vyakulata, to realize God? That is very important. So what in the beginning of the spiritual life, what helped Sri Ramakrishna other than the only thing he got was the spiritual initiation, nothing else, no other help. So what was the only support for him? He straight away proceeded to practice the discipline, the extreme eagerness of heart, Vyakulata. The extreme eagerness of heart, that's called Vyakulata, for the realization of God was the only main support during that period. So from this, what are we to understand? The important thing in our spiritual life, as a spiritual sadhakas, we are all mumukshus, is that intensity. How intensely do you want to do the sadhana? You want to reach God? The eagerness, the sincerity to realize God, that is the mainstay. That is very, very important spiritual life. You may boast, oh, I have got the greatest of the gurus, the president, the vice president, he was a realized soul. What is that to you? Until you have that eagerness to follow what the guru has told you and go forward in spiritual life, it will not make any impact. Yes, it will make impact, but not a major impact. It will be a small impact. But what is eager? What is very, very important is your sincerity, your eagerness, your vyakulata. That is very, very important for the sadhaka. So we are studying the life of Sri Ramakrishna because we should know what is very, very important in the life of sadhaka. As spiritual aspirant, what is the important thing which should be there in us? So Sri Ramakrishna proceeded to practice all this discipline. The extreme eagerness of his heart for the realization of God was his main support during that period. That is very, very important. Vyakulata. Ramakrishna used to tell in the gospel again and again, Vyakulata, Vyakulata. So what is this Vyakulata? It's a Sanskrit term. We should know what is that Vyakulata. Then we can know, you will get an idea of what is eagerness. Suppose we will imagine now mother is having a small child of maybe 1 year or 2 years. It has started walking. So she's taking that baby in the marketplace. A lot of people there, millions of people in the market. People are going around, or a fair. Let us think it is a fair. Lots of people are there, thousands and thousands or millions. So just like Kumbh Mela. So there will be so many people there assembled. So when that mother was taking that baby of 1 or 2 years there, suddenly when for some purchases or something to get something, she put that baby down. So the baby, it is innocent, it walked here and there and got lost. So now after purchasing the thing, the mother sees the baby is not down there. It's walked away somewhere. The fair or that Kumbh Mela or something, so many lakhs and lakhs of people are there. Then what will be the condition of the mother? She will be frantically searching for that child. So she has lost that child, which is her own child, her own thing. And now to get back that child, she'll be frantically searching. She'll be crying, she'll be shouting, she'll be pushing everybody, going here and there, searching that baby. What will happen to the baby? What will be my condition of the baby? The mother will be so much disturbed. She will be searching for that baby. So that state of mind is called Vyakulata. You lost something, your own thing. And now you want to that very precious thing. You want to find it back. So you're frantically searching, not ordinarily. Not, okay, tomorrow let me go and search. Let me go and give the complaint to the policeman. They will search it and give me back. I will go and sleep nicely. I will have my bath. I will go there and sleep nicely, I will take rest, I will enjoy everything in the fair. Will you think that? No, you can't. You'll be frantically searching. So that state of mind is called Vyakulata. So now, much more valuable, you can't even value it, give any value. It's so valuable. That is your own self, God. Your Antaryamin, Paramatman, you have lost it now. It was your nature, infinite bliss. You have lost that. So now, how should you be frantically searching for that? How should you be aspiring to get back that infinite joy, infinite existence, infinite bliss, infinite consciousness, knowledge, awareness? So that is Vyakulata. How sincerely you want to get, how frantically you want to get back to your real state. You're searching for God. That is called Vyakulata. So that's sincerity. So I just gave you the example of what is Vyakulata. So turn towards God to realize God, just like that mother or anything you might have lost some very valuable gem you had, very costly, maybe billions of dollars, some gem you had and you lost it, somebody stole it away. How will you be feeling to get it back? The valuable thing. Like that, your Atman, your Paramatma Swarupa, which is within you, your real nature, is much more valuable than that. Much more important than these worldly things. So how should you be frantically searching for that? When you lost that important thing, how will you be feeling? But we are not at all interested in that. We are enjoying all this worldly life and forgotten that aram se raho. So that is Vyakulata. How sincerely you are trying to get back to that state. So now Ramakrishna had only support was his Vyakulata. What is that? He straight away proceeded to practice the disciplines, the extreme eagerness of his heart for the realization of God was his main support during that period. This eagerness became gradually stronger and stronger. What happened? Shattered his body and mind in a short time. Shattered his body and mind in a short time and recast them into an unexpected new mold. Now that old body and mind was shattered and it was recast into an unexpected new mold. Besides, it produced in him a great love for his chosen ideal, which took him beyond the firm steel frame of the rules and regulations. Again, I'll repeat it. Besides, it produced in him a great love for his chosen ideal, to Ishtadevata, to Goddess Mother, Divine Mother. Great love, produced in him great love for the chosen ideal, which took him the firm, beyond the firm steel frame of rules and regulations of ritualistic devotion. So now, how did he go beyond this iron frame or steel frame of rules and regulations? What took him there? The intense love for chosen ideal took him beyond the firm steel frame of rules and regulations of ritualistic devotion. And what is that? How does it look? Spontaneity, to the spontaneity and freedom of Ragatmika Bhakti. What is that pure Bhakti, Ragatmika Bhakti, full of love, full of attachment to God, Ishtadevata? So spontaneity and freedom of Ragatmika form of divine love, culminating in the immediate realization of the Divine Mother, as also the attainment of yogic power. So now, when they get that intensity of devotion, Ragatmika Bhakti, some devotees also even become angry with God. They will quarrel with God. They may fight with God also. So that is one of the aspect of, they don't feel the difference. They're ready to fight with God too. So that is out of the love and just like the child fights with the mother if it wants something. It is just like that. So with that Ragatmika Bhakti, form of divine love culminating in the immediate realization of the Divine Mother, is also the attainment of yogic powers. The reader may perhaps say, what was the need for any further sadhana when he has now realized God now? What was the need for Ramakrishna for any further sadhana? Because he has attained the highest. For him, if he attained to the highest spiritual realization, even in this first place, after getting that mantra from Kena Rama Bhattacharya, with his own Vyakulata, that intense eagerness of the heart, sincerity for spiritual life, he attained the highest now, that awareness, that consciousness in the form of Divine Mother, Kali. Why did he do again take up the difficulty of doing sadhana further and realize something higher or something else, different aspects? He has got it now. Why should he again take the trouble? If that is the question, where was the need for any further sadhana for Ramakrishna if he attained the highest spiritual realization, even in the first place of sadhana? What was then left for him further to attain to? What was there for him to attain to when he has attained the highest already? We should like to say in reply that although this is true in a way, sadhana was necessary even afterwards. Why? The master used to say, trees and creepers, flower first. We have studied or we have seen. You did not study botany to see that. You see in the nature everywhere. What does the flower, what does the creeper or the tree or the plant do? It will flower first, and then that flower will be transformed into fruit after the pollination, paragasparsha, and so many other things. We all know that. You studied in botany or need not study in botany, you have seen it with your own eyes. So the flower will naturally go to the state of fruit. That is a natural way. The master himself used to say, trees and creepers flower first and bear fruit next, according to the usual law of nature. But there are a few among them. Now, have you seen the pumpkin creeper? What does it happen there in the pumpkin creeper? There are a few among them whose fruits come out first and flowers next. The pumpkin and other category, you can see the fruit will come first and then the flower. Yeah, that is the other thing. The flower and then the fruit is a natural thing in the nature, generalized. But few things are there, few creepers are there, few plants are there where the fruit will be first. Just like I gave you the example of the pumpkin. Go and observe the pumpkin, plant a pumpkin, creeper. Then you see the flowers come first. No, sorry, the fruits come first. And then there is a pumpkin which you eat comes first. And then the flower. So Ramakrishna himself used to give this example, trees and creepers, flower first and bear fruit next, according to the usual law of nature. But there are few among them whose fruits come out first and flowers next. So the development of master's mind, the development of master's mind in the field of sadhana took place exactly like the other one, the next one, of the latter class of the trees and creepers, which fruits come first and then the flower next. So the development of master's mind in the field of sadhana took place exactly like that of the latter class of trees and creepers. Therefore, the objection of the reader is true in a way. But although the master had such visions, etc., at the beginning of his sadhana, he could not become perfectly sure whether they were real and whether he had reached the ultimate goal. So now he has got all those things without the help of the guru, without the help of the scriptures. So he has got even before the fruit has already come, even without the flower. So with his own eagerness, with his own self-effort, he has gone all those things. He had got all those things. But now the doubt arises in the mind. All these all real? Have I gone through the proper direction, path? Have I reached the proper goal? So there'll be a doubt in the mind. So now, how to overcome that doubt? How to verify that? Then you have to verify, do the sadhanas according to the scriptures, according to the guidance of the guru, then find out the reality. Then you can compare what you got earlier by your own self-effort is true. So now you want to confirm it. So that's why you have to do sadhana. You have already got it. Now again you attach to flower. You have to do the sadhana just to verify it. So therefore, the objection of the reader is true in a way, but although the master had such visions, etc., realized the highest without any guru, without any other help, guidance of the scriptures, by his own pure self-effort. In the beginning of the sadhana itself, he could not become perfectly sure whether they were real and whether he had reached the ultimate goal. The doubt will be there. He could do this only on comparing the spontaneous experiences of his with the recorded experiences of the sadhakas of the past. So he had got the spontaneous experience now, is to compare with the sadhakas who have done the spiritual practices and got the result. And what is that? That is scriptures. What are scriptures? Scriptures are the records of the experiences of the sages and seers and the saints who have practiced this path earlier, and that result is recorded. They are the scriptures. Scriptures are nothing coming from the heaven or something. They are all nothing but the experiences of the great souls who have led this spiritual life earlier. So now Ramakrishna has done all this thing, got all those things, but he has to now confirm. When he confirms it with the scriptures, with that practices, taking the help of the Guru, then he can, oh, what I have got now, without the help of the Guru, without the help of any scriptures, are true. Yeah, they're not hallucinations. They're not my imaginations. They're true. Therefore, he could do this only on comparing the spontaneous experiences of his with the recorded experiences of the sadhakas, that are the spiritual aspirants of the past. And also further by reproducing in himself, by following the practices prescribed in the scriptures, those identical experiences which he had without their aid. Therefore, sadhana was afterwards necessary. Spiritual practices, disciplines was necessary for this incarnation. For him, it became necessary for him to realize again by following the path and procedures described in the scriptures what he had experienced before by the incomprehensible grace of Divine Mother. So I always tell, what is divine grace is directly proportional to your self-effort. Is God partial to somebody? Is God shows some love to somebody, shows grace to somebody and not to others? No. God is always pouring his grace on you. And how can you get it? By unfurling the mast or the sail of the boat. The boatman can get the wind which is always blowing. The wind, the grace of God called the wind is flowing on all the boatmen. No partiality, no partisanship. But that boatman who gets up, makes the strength, effort of getting up and opening the sails, his boat will move. So self-effort is directly proportional to God's grace. How will you get the God's grace? By self-effort. So self-effort is directly proportional to God's grace. And what is the constant? In the equations you'll be seeing in physics and mathematics, they will do all these equations, they'll tell directly proportional. Something is directly proportional to something, there will be one constant K always. What is that constant K here? It is faith. So that mother's grace on him, the divine mother's grace on him, what is that? Is his self-effort. So that's why here the divine mother's, what he had experienced before by the incomprehensible grace of the divine mother, with the eagerness of his heart as his only help. He got all these things only with the divine mother's grace, and also with the eagerness of his heart and his own as his only help. What was his only help? The eagerness of his heart to find the truth, Vyakulata. The scriptures maintain that these three conditions are to be fulfilled if an aspirant is to have absolute conviction. What are the three conditions which are to be fulfilled according to the scriptures? In an aspirant to have absolute conviction, faith, he must have personal experience. Without having your personal experience, you don't get conviction. He has to compare his own visions and extraordinary experiences with the truths taught by the Guru. Is to compare with the teachings of his Guru, what the experience the Guru has got is to compare his own experience. First of all, his personal experience. Then that personal experience is to be compared with that of his Guru. He has also got to compare them with the experience of the past sadhakas, that is the scriptures, as recorded in the scriptures. His doubts are absolutely dispelled when the identity of the experience is established by this threefold comparison, and his mind thenceforth rests in perfect peace. Then he gets perfect conviction. Then he can understand what the experience he had is all real. That is scientific. That is how it becomes more logical, analytical, and scientific. So he compares with the word of the Guru, then whatever our scriptures have told is true. So now you can see what is the special greatness of our incarnation, Ramakrishna, the great incarnation is. He is now proving to the world the words of the scriptures are true. Our Hinduism, all the scriptures in Hinduism are not something superstitions recorded by some seers and sages. They're all true because he's comparing with own experience and he's finding everything is true. He's corroborating. So it is just science, pure science in the laboratory. What is the laboratory now? He's making his own personality, his own mind, his own body as the laboratory and doing all the experiments. And then he's showing to the world that all the scriptures in Hinduism, everything is true. It will take you to that God. Everything is true. See, now you can understand what is the work of the incarnation. So many things the incarnation has to do. So now we'll come to know, as I told you in the beginning of the introduction itself, what did I tell? Why should we go through all this life of Sri Ramakrishna? All that so many, what do you call, subtle argumentation in the introduction of Shardanandaji Maharaj, monoism, dualism, Advaita, then all that unreality of the world, reality here, two plane of consciousness. Why should we undergo all these things? What will happen to us? What do we gain from that? And now Shardanandaji will to that. That's why we are doing all these things. As an example of what has been said above, we may point to an event in the life of Shukadeva, the foremost of Paramahamsas, the son of Vyasa. As an example of what has been said above, we may point to an event in the life of Shukadeva, the foremost of Paramahamsas, the son of Vyasa Maharshi. Shukadeva, as soon as he was born, he was untouched by Maya. He was a realized soul. As soon as he was born, he was a realized soul, untouched by Maya. He used to have various divine visions and extraordinary experiences in his life from his birth for the purpose of ascertaining whether they were real and whether he had reached the goal. He afterwards studied the Vedas and 6 branches of study. What are the 6 branches of studies of the Vedas? Shiksha, that's called Shiksha, 6 branches of Vedas. Or first he studied the whole of Vedas. And the Vedas have our Hindu scriptures, the main scriptures are Vedas. So after that, there are 6 schools of auxiliaries. What are they? He studied the Vedas, then the 6 branches of study, auxiliaries to them, and other Shastras. What are those 6 auxiliaries of Vedas? Shiksha, first one. The science which teaches the proper pronunciation of the words and laws of euphony in the Vedas. 2. Kalpa, that which lays down the rituals and prescribes rules of ceremonials and sacrifices acts. This is another branch or part, auxiliary of Vedas. 3rd, grammar, Vyakarana. Grammar, by grammar you can understand what are the things there happening in Vedas, what are the words given there. So that will help you. Grammar, Vyakarana. What is the 4th auxiliary of Vedas? Nirukta, the etymological explanation of the difficult Vedic words. So that is the 4th auxiliary. So what is it called? Nirukta. What is Nirukta teaching? The etymological explanations of difficult Vedic words. What is the 5th auxiliary of Vedas? The science of prosody. And what is the 6th? Astronomy. Astronomy. That is Jyotish Shastra. They are collectively called Vedangas, the branches, the auxiliary of Vedas. So Shukadeva, even though as he was born, he was a born realized soul. Even when he came down to the earth, even before Coming down to the earth, even in the womb of the mother, he was a realized soul. He was not touched by Maya. But after that, after becoming a little elderly in his youth, he was a eternal youth. He had eternal youth. For the purpose of ascertaining whether they were real, all the visions and all the realization he had as soon as he was born, to ascertain whether they were real and whether he had reached the goal, he studied the Vedas and the six branches of the auxiliaries, that is Vedanga, and other Shastras, that is other scriptures, from with his father. His father was an expert. He was the one who divided all the Vedas. He edited Vedas. That's why he got the name Vedavyasa. His name was Krishna Dvaipayana. Krishna Dvaipayana. He got the name Vedavyasa because he edited Vedas. So he was expert. He was the one who edited all the Puranas, 18 Puranas. He was the one who wrote Mahabharata. He was the one who wrote or brought into the form, the written form, the poetical form of Bhagavad Gita was though given by Lord Krishna, put it into the poetical forms, the Vedas, this thing Brahma Sutra was purely written by him. So all the canonical texts, the Prakarana Grantha, not Prakarana, the Prasthanatraya, the three, the Upanishad collected by him, then Bhagavad Gita again put into that form by him, though they were the teachings of Krishna, Brahma Sutra, the logical end of all these things, again it was composed by him. Then Puranas, all the scriptures is an adept. So he studied all those things with his father Vedavyasa, was unaware of all the scriptures. When his studies came to an end, he said to his father, I have been experiencing all these things which are told in the scriptures from my birth, all the spiritual states recorded in the scriptures, but I cannot be perfectly sure that these states and experiences are the ultimate truth. I have to make it, I want to get it sure that all these things are true. So please tell me now what you yourself have experienced regarding those things. So Vyasa of supreme knowledge reflected within himself. I have always been teaching Shuka the goal of spirituality and the ultimate truth, telling him the experiences of my own life born of spiritual practices, but doubts have not yet been removed from his mind. He thinks that although he has been desirous of knowing the truth, I, being overpowered with fatherly affection, have not given him the whole truth, lest he should leave the worldly life on being enlightened. So he had that doubt. This, he thinks, is the reason why all his doubts have not been removed. Therefore, it is good for him to hear these things from some other wise man. Thinking so, Vyasa said, I am unable to remove your doubts. It is not unknown to you that Janaka, the king of Mithila, the father of Mother Sita, Janaka, the king of Mithila, is truly a man of knowledge. Go to him and have all your problems solved. So, directed by his father, Shukadeva, it is written in the Mahabharata, went immediately to Mithila, taught by Janaka, a sage among kings, about the experience that knowers of Brahman have. Shuka found a complete identity between the instructions of the Guru, the words of the scriptures, and the experiences of his own life. So now we can see Shuka was a born realized soul. He learned all these Vedas and got all that comparison, but still a doubt had remained. He thought that his father has not given him complete. Vyasa has not, because he might give up the householder's life and go away. So he's hiding something. He's not giving the truth. So he had to go, guided by his father, go to Janaka, the father of Mother Sita, from Mithila, and learn everything again. Then only his doubt vanished. Taught by Janaka, the sage among kings, about the experiences. He was called Rajarshi, the sage. He was called the Rajarshi. What is the meaning of that? Sage among kings. About the experience the knowers of Brahman have, Shuka found a complete identity between the instructions of the Guru, that is Janaka, the words of the scriptures which he had studied from the father, and his own experience of his own life. So I told you that Shuka was a born realized soul. We should know how he was a born realized soul. We should go to the story now. We should understand. You know that 2 years back I had gone to Amarnath Yatra. So why did I take so much of pain to go there? 36 kilometers, high trekking in the mountains, cold, freezing Himalayas. minus 30, minus 20 degrees, and bearing all the hardships there, climbing up uphill stuff like this. You have to climb 36 kilometers, up and down, up and down. The oxygen level goes down. You may die also. So much of rain, landslides, all those hardship I had to bear and go there. Many people, not only me, millions and millions of people go. Every year there will be 2 or 3 lakhs people, or maybe 20 lakh people visiting that place and having the darshan of the ice linga in the cave, Amarnath Guha. The cave, big cave is there on the top of the mountain, big cave. And in that cave, that ice during the summer, the ice linga forms there. If the winter, okay, you can understand. But it is during the summer. It's not the winter. So in winter, it will be ice and ice everywhere. But it is the rainy season. This is the summer heat will be there in the morning, daytime. The temperature will go to plus 50, plus 55. So that will be the temperature. But even then, there will be ice linga, big, up to 12 feet, sometimes 15 feet shivaling of ice will be formed there in that place. What is that place? Why did I go there? So now we can connect that story with this Shuka. What happened? Mother Parvati wanted to know the truth of this creation and the immortality, how the living beings can become immortal, go beyond death. Then Shiva told, okay, I will give you that knowledge, but no other being should hear it. If they hear that, then they become liberated and the whole creation will be disturbed. If everybody hears this knowledge, they will go beyond death. They will understand the essence of life and they will give up everything and merge in Parabrahma in the Lord. That's why I can't give it to everybody. This creation has to go, continue. The people have to be in Maya, in this delusion and live in this world. Otherwise the creation will end. So I will tell you only to you. So come, we will go to a special place. Shiva took Mother Parvati, that is Mother Durga or Kali, whatever whom I will call, to that place. He walked and walked. Wherever he walked, we have to go through that place. Wherever Shiva took that Parvati and walked all those things to that Himalayan cave, so that is the path we have to follow. So from that Srinagar, then we have to go to another place. From there, the base camp will be there. From the base camp, you have to walk to the next thing. So while going, taking Parvati and his group, then he gave up his Nagabarana, his ornament. That is a snake. He asked snake to stay somewhere there itself. That is called Sheshanaga. Shesha means left, Naga means the snakes. Then there, the oxygen level is very low. You will feel giddy. You may also faint and you can't go forward. Very less oxygen. So still go forward. Then there is a place where he gave up the Chandanwadi, it's called Chandanwadi. He gave up the moon. He kept that moon. So then he went to another place. He told Ganesha and other people to stay there. He didn't take Ganesha further. Then he went still further like that. Everything he was giving up. Everything. Nobody should come there. Then finally, he went only himself and Mother Parvati. And there in that cave, it is such everywhere frozen ice. So then afterwards, as you move forward, you will see there will be ice and ice, no plants at all. Because of the ice, always there is ice and ice covered by ice. So you cannot get even any living beings, very difficult. But when he entered the cave, he called one of his Bhutagana, one of the Bhutaganas, and told, you burn off everything, sanitize this place. No living beings, even Krimi Kita, microbes should be here. Because if they hear, any living being hears it, then they will become liberated. So nobody should hear it. It's only Parvati. So you burn off this whole place, sanitize this whole place, that cave. Then that Bhutagana of Lord Shiva, the servant of Lord Shiva, sanitized the whole place and he went away. So now Mother Parvati is sitting on that stone and Shiva is sitting there, another in that cave, big cave. If you go there, you can go to India and do that traveling. I finished that 2 years back and came. And in that cave, Shiva started telling about the secrets of life, secret of death and overcoming, how to overcome death. So Amara means death. Amara means deathless or beyond death. So that knowledge he gave. That's why Shiva gets the name Amaranatha, the Lord of immortality. The Lord who gave the knowledge of overcoming death to Mother Parvati there. So while he was giving, see that you have to note that the Bhutagana sanitized all the place in the cave everywhere. but he didn't sanitize or burn the place where Mother Parvati was sitting and Shiva was sitting. So where Parvati was sitting, underneath, there was one, what do you call, the egg of a parrot. The egg of a parrot was in the place where Mother Parvati was sitting, underneath in that place. So that place was not burnt by this because Mother Parvati is sitting there. So when, because there's the Divine Mother, nature, the earth, the whole universe is given birth by that Divine Mother. The ordinary mother in the form of the parrot sits on that parrot and gives the heat and breaks open into this thing. If the Divine Mother of the whole universe, all millions of universe is created by the Divine Mother is sitting on that, is then what will be the warmth or the presence of the Divine Mother? So that bird hatched, the egg hatched into a parrot. And when Shiva was telling all that gnana and meditation, not only Mother Parvati is hearing, the parrot also heard. So now you see that I just told some terse things about Advaita and other things, knowledge of Parabrahman, knowledge of God. You started feeling sleepy, I think, because you were getting bored. Then Mother Parvati also, while hearing that, closing her eyes and hearing all that terse and very difficult subject, she too went to sleep. Mother Parvati went to sleep. So suppose somebody is telling you something, what do? You tell, hmm. So that to tell that the other person who is telling you those things should understand that you are hearing it. So you go on telling, hmm. After some time, after every maybe 10 second or 20 second, you tell that, to tell that you have understood it. Yes, I am hearing it. And Lord Shiva was hearing the Mother Parvati's whenever he did after 30, 40 seconds or 1 minute, Mother Parvati used to tell, Now, after some time, Mother Parvati went to sleep, sitting there. Shiva in deep meditation is continuing, but the word is going on. After he finished everything, giving that knowledge, he opened the eyes in meditation, after the meditation in Samadhi, and saw that Mother Parvati is asleep. Then who was the person who was telling other than Parvati? Nobody is here. I sanitized the whole place. I burnt up the whole place. Who is the person who was hearing all this thing and telling So it was that parrot. Because of the presence of Divine Mother, the parrot had hatched. So this parrot heard all the secret of this. And it became a realized soul, the parrot. Now Shiva came to know this. If you let it free, this parrot will go and leak out all the secret. So it started flying. Shiva wanted to destroy it or kill it. So the parrot flew from there. It becomes strong, grown because of it. It has gone forward in this spiritual life. Quickly it became a bigger one because the presence of Shiva, the hearing of that knowledge, and the presence of the mother. It went forward. It was born and became very full-fledged. Started flying from Shiva because Shiva will kill it now. He wanted to keep that a secret. He flew, and Shiva went with the Trishula behind to destroy it. Flew and came down to the plains, to the ashrama of Shuka Maharshi. Sorry, not Shuka Maharshi, Vyasa Maharshi. Vyasa Maharshi's wife was there in the ashrama. She was yawning, and this parrot entered the mouth and went to her stomach and stayed there, protected itself there in the stomach. Shiva came. Now he has to kill that bird, destroy that bird, parrot, to destroy the wife of Shuka also. And, Vyasa also. Vyasa Maharshi came. He came to know that he pleaded Shiva, fell at the feet of Shiva and told, please spare the life of my wife. Don't kill her. Okay, Shiva told, okay, and went back. So this baby, this parrot in the womb grew up into this thing because you know that by satsanga. You know the story of satsanga. I've told that now I can't tell you. Now I will be digressive because of the presence of Mother Parvati and Shiva and the knowledge. This parrot from the state of that bird evolution, it's a so lower state of evolution. It's a bird. From bird, it has to become something else. From fish, the birds have come. From the birds, the next evolution. Then we are go on seeing up to the human being because of the presence of Lord Shiva and Parvati, and also by the knowledge it has got. It jumped from the state of bird to the human being. So he became that baby, the human being. Then mother conceived, that is the Shuka, the Vyasa Maharshi's wife, conceived that baby. As soon as it was born, because it has got the realization, the Atman, the knowledge beyond death and life, immortality. So even when it was born, it became a youth, became a bigger youth, but eternally he stayed there as a youth, full of knowledge. He's realized everything now. That is Shuka Maharshi. So why did he get the name Shuka? Shuka means parrot. That's why he gets the name Shuka, because he has come from that parrot. You can see some of the pictures of Shuka Maharshi with the parrot head. It's just a symbological thing, but it was a bird now. It was a parrot, and it got the life of the human being because of the knowledge of Parabrahma. It has come up, he's a realized soul. Now we read all the stories. After that, Vyasa Maharshi taught him, because it was having so many experiences of that, beyond that Atman, Parabrahman, beyond death and everything, Atma Gnana, Parabrahma Gnana, Paramatma Gnana, everything, it has gone the knowledge. Now, all that visions and experiences it is having even before birth, it has got direct Gnana from Shiva. The parrot, in the form of the parrot itself, he has got this. Now it is getting more and more. And now Shuka Maharshi also taught about all Vedas, Upanishads, everything, all the scriptures. It compared, that Shuka compared everything. But now he had still doubts. Then he had to go to Janaka and learn. That's why now that example is being given here by Shardanandaji Maharaj to show that if that is the case with ordinary bird and that became Shuka and a realized soul even before birth, what about the case with Sri Ramakrishna, who is a divine incarnation? Now the divine incarnation, even though with his own self-effort, that is the eagerness to find the lost Parabrahma Swarupa, Paramatma Swarupa, his own real nature, with that eagerness, he got that knowledge. He got the Divine Mother, realized Divine Mother. Then now he started under the different tutelage of gurus like Bharavi Brahmani, Totapuri, Jatadhari, and other gurus. They came there. Then they taught him different varieties, various scriptures. He realized the same truth, then compared that. So by giving the example of Shuka Maharshi, Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, why did he take up all those things? Why did he take up all this sadhana? So the example of Shuka Maharshi has been given. And I told you, how did Shuka Maharshi get his knowledge even before birth? Why did he get the name? I told you the Amarnath Yatra. So you're inspired by that, you can go to Amarnath anytime, whenever you like. So now this great Shuka, the son of Vyasa Maharshi, found a complete identity between the instructions of the Guru, that is Janaka, the words of the scriptures. He has studied it under his father, Vyasa Maharshi, and his own experience of the life. Now he became convinced, yes, all that is true. Likewise, Ramakrishna has experienced everything now by his own self-effort, but he has his own doubt. Are they true? Are they hallucination? Are they my imagination? So now he has to counter-check, he has to verify. So now we'll do sadhana and then verify all those things, and then he becomes convinced they're all true. So that knowledge he will give us. Why should he do all these things? It is for us. He's doing all those things for us, so that when he compares scientifically, without any knowledge, without reading all those things, now we will feel all the words of the scriptures. Our Hinduism is true and true and true. So now we shall go forward and see some more and end our conversation, because we are already approaching 8 o'clock. So besides the above mentioned reasons, there was another profound reason why the master practiced sadhana later. We shall merely mention it here. The aim of the master sadhana was not the attainment of peace only in his own life. He was already in that higher state. He's an avatara, he's God himself, he's Parabrahma Swarupa. Why did he take the human form? Come here. So there may be some other purpose too. Is it only for the conviction that he has to do all these sadhanas? There is some other purpose, higher purpose. And what is that purpose? Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, besides the above mentioned reason, there was another profound reason why Master, that is Sri Ramakrishna, practiced sadhana, spiritual practices later. We shall merely mention it here. The aim of the Master's sadhana was not the attainment of peace only in his own life because he had all that in abundance. He came down, took up all the imperfection of a human being. A human body is putting all the Maya upon himself. And why did he suffer and do all those things and then realize what was the higher motive? The Divine Mother made him assume a body for the good of the world. It is for us, for you, for me, for all of us, so that we may get inspiration, give up this lower aspect of life and attain that highest, enjoy that peace and bliss. It is not his for his peace, he has got it. The Divine Mother made him assume a body for the good of the world. What is the world? Is the world some mud and stone and building here? No, it is the people, it is the living beings which are here, is the world. What will all the other deadly things, the dead things like stone and machine and the building do? It is for you. It is the world means you and me. All the living beings is the world. It's not the dead things, the stone, the mountains, and the water, the world. It's you, the living beings. All the living beings is the world. So the Divine Mother made him assume a form for the good of the world, that is, we human beings, for us, for you and me. He had therefore to be acquainted with the sadhana of all religions and their ultimate goal, so that he might be in a position to become a true spiritual teacher. What will happen if he becomes a true spiritual teacher? So that we can understand it clearly and go forward in spiritual life. It will be a help to us. That is the reason Divine Mother has done all this plan. So that we can be benefited. We can get that infinite peace. We can get the path and go forward. Higher, rise higher to realize our real nature. To show what is sadhana, to show what is spiritual practices, what is spiritual life. That is the reason. The Divine Mother made him assume a body for the good of the world. He had therefore to be acquainted with the sadhanas of all the religions and their ultimate goal, so that he might be in a position to become a true spiritual teacher, guru. Therefore, an extraordinary effort is seen on the master's part to ascertain extraordinary effort, not ordinary effort, is seen on the master's part to ascertain by actual practice the truth or fallacy of all the religious doctrines. That is not all. By placing before mankind and almost, see again, this is very, very important thing I'm going to tell you. Note it. Therefore, that is not all. By placing before mankind an almost unlettered person who could, by his spiritual practices, attain a natural way the experiences recorded in all the scriptures, an unlettered, almost unlettered. Now you know why did Ramakrishna not study arithmetic? He didn't study science. He didn't study Vedas. He didn't study Sanskrit and other things. Why did he give up his education? Though he had all the possibilities, the intellect, the sharp memory, the photographic memory, and all that he could do in a trice, but he didn't do it. Why? Why did? Why didn't Divine Mother and make him undergo all these things? Because, see, now the point comes. By placing before mankind an almost unlettered person who could, by his spiritual practices, attain in a natural way the experiences recorded in all the scriptures, the Divine Mother has proved to the modern age the truth of the Vedas, the scriptures of our Sanatana Dharma, the Hinduism. Be proud to be called a Hindu. Should have that pride that I'm a Hindu. All these are true. The Divine Mother had made all these plans, so much of difficulty to show, prove that our Vedas, our scriptures, our Bhagavad Gita is true. How great you are as Hindus. How pride you should feel that you are Hindus. That's why Vivekananda used to tell, keep your hand on the chest and feel proud that you are a Hindu and tell boldly to the world, I am a Hindu. Divine Mother has taken so much of trouble to prove it. Ramakrishna has to come down. The whole Parabrahma Swarupa, God himself has to come down and be an unlettered person. So, by placing before mankind the almost unlettered person who could, by his spiritual practices, attain in a natural way the experiences recorded in all the scriptures, The Divine Mother has proved to the modern world, modern age, the truth of the Vedas, the highest of the scriptures of Hindus, the truth of the Vedas, the truth of the Puranas, all other scriptures, and also the truth of the Bible, the truth of the Quran, and all other religious scriptures. After that, that is also done. That was why there was no cessation of his sadhana. Now you got the answer why Ramakrishna did all the sadhanas after he has got the highest realization. Why did he do all these things? Practically, all those things we saw the life of Shuka, where he did it. Why? To get the conviction. But is that all? No. Something higher. Why? To prove they are all true. For us to go forward. It is all for us. To help us. To help all the living beings. So all the other religious scriptures too. Religions of the world. Other world too. Nobody would have believed otherwise. That was why there was no cessation of his sadhana. Even after he had personally attained peace, the more we proceed to study this extraordinary life, what will happen? Why should we make all this trouble to study the life of Ramakrishna, the Avatar Purusha? What will happen to us? What do I gain? We're always utilitarians. We always ask, what is the utility? What do I get it from? We're all selfish, the genes, it has gone to selfishness, has gone to the genes. So we'll be asking, what do I get from it? What am I benefited? What is the profit to me? What is the labha? So now Sharadananda Ji Maharaj is telling what are you going to get? The more we proceed to study this extraordinary life, the more clearly shall we see how, with a view to accomplishing the specific end mentioned above, the universal mother brought to the master at the proper time, perfected men, brought to the master the perfected men at the proper time, and scholars of every denomination by putting him directly under their instruction. She made him acquainted with the teachings and disciplines of various religions, which, with his rare spiritual genius, he could master very quickly and remember always, thanks to his wonderfully retentive memory. All that was done for us so that we can move forward in spiritual life. We get the inspiration, then our progress will be very quick. We get faith, intense faith will be generated, and we can go forward. We can understand what is spiritual life. We will get faith, we will get conviction and move forward in spiritual life. That is the reason why all this drama, the Leela, the sport has to be done. So, how wonderful now, all that study we have undergone, all that pain we have taken to understand this Advaita and Dvaita and all those things is bearing fruit. Can come to know why and how. So, we will stop our discussion here. It was so wonderful. We will continue. We will see the sadhana still further and enjoy it. So blissful. So many things are coming and we are understanding what is sadhana, what is our life, who are we, everything is becoming clearer and clearer and it is giving joy and bliss, pure bliss, unsullied bliss. Okay, we'll stop our discussion. We'll see it again, the same discussion on Sunday and Monday, early morning at the same time. Then tomorrow evening, today is Friday, tomorrow is Saturday evening, we have the Bhagavad Gita discussion. There also you will be knowing about the reality of yourself, truth of the self, your real nature, told by Lord Krishna himself. The earlier avatar of Ramakrishna is Krishna. So Ramakrishna himself is giving there all that Bhagavad Gita. Then Monday we have evening the puja class, science of worship. All that thing is put into the ritual form. All this truth, the great truth of the Vedas, the great truth given by Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna has done all those puja also to find out, show that all this were true. The Bhuta Shuddhi and everything, every aspect of the puja, you will see that has been done by Ramakrishna and proved that they are true. So when you do that, it is a practical aspect, just like technology, do it and you get the joy immediately there. So that science of worship is on Monday, that discussion will be on Monday evening, 6 o'clock South African time, 9:30 Indian time. Then Tuesday we have Viveka Chudamani, the Crest Jewel of Discrimination. telling us about discrimination, Viveka, Chudamani, the Krishna. Then after that study, again Wednesday we have Bhagavad Gita study from the second chapter. Kurmongani Vasayata Samharte Chayam. Kurmongani Vasarvashaha. I'm discussing about that only now. I've almost completed it. We'll go to the next 59th verse also in the next class. So all these discussion are being done. You can join in and enjoy that. So now this Corona Mataji, this epidemic has helped us. Otherwise there would have been no these online classes. You wouldn't have this free time to study all these things. In a way, it's a boon in disguise. You are getting all this knowledge. Ramakrishna is Leela is being studied. Otherwise you would have so much of worldly activities to do. See so many people, though they are in all this tension, they don't want to come. They don't want to give up their worldly attachments and other things. They don't want to give up the sleep early in the morning. They're sleeping nicely, covering with blankets. But you, lucky people, are the only few, chosen few, who have come out to study these things and enjoy this. So you're getting the bliss. There's no doubt about it. So if you have any questions, if you have any doubts on the subject which we have discussed today on spiritual life, you can now utilize this time now. If you have any doubt.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. This is Nirmala from Bangalore.
Yes, Mother, please tell.
Today is Nagara Chauthi.
Yes, Mother.
And Ramakrishna is called as Gata Sarpa. And we had done the puja of Nagara Chauthi.
Maybe, Mother, I don't know Nagara Chauthi and things. Might have done. I'm not aware if it. If it is that, if it is an auspicious day, and if he has done it, wonderful.
Yes. Ramakrishna is called as Gata Sarpana. Swamiji.
Yeah, Gadadhara. Gadadhara because he was Lord Vishnu.
Gata Sarpa. Gata Sarpa. Gata Sarpa.
Oh, Gata Sarpa. Okay, okay. Gata Sarpa means Kundalini. Kundalini.
Kundalini, yeah. Today is the very auspicious for us. Swamiji.
Okay, Mother. That's good. See, if you, whenever you remember the God, that itself becomes festival. Hariyanu Nenesida Divasa, Shubha Divasa. The moment you remember God, Lord, that is the festival, that will be the most auspicious thing. So we are remembering Ramakrishna, that itself is the auspicious and the highest festival, I think. So every time if you remember God, then you are enjoying the festival. So many people ask me, Swamiji, how was your Sunday? I tell every day is Sunday for me. Because I'm enjoying every moment, I'm enjoying the memory of God every second. So every day is festival for me. Every day is auspicious for me.
Yes.
Okay, Mother. Any other questions? Any other this thing? Doubts if you have of the spiritual life?
Maharaj, Madhu here, Maharaj.
Yes, Madhu, please tell.
Yeah, Maharaj, the impact that Thakur had on Hindu sadhakas, does the same impact he had on the Mohammedan or Christians?
Yeah.
Do you have examples?
Multi millions are having it, but it is all, see, they don't want to come out in the open. Many devotees in the Islamic things are there secretly doing it. Many Christian monks and other this thing, they're studying secretly Ramakrishna's life. They keep it secretly, gospel, they study it. So they can't come out because they fear of their leaders. They may punish them. So in Islam, if you openly proclaim any other religion, they may kill you also. In Christianity and other things, you may be outcast. So they don't do it. They secretly they're doing it. They're getting the benefit.
Okay, Maharaj. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other doubts?
Swamiji, why do
Yes.
we have dreams of like lions chasing us or something of that nature, where we have to be retreating and something is chasing us?
I couldn't hear your question properly because there was it was very low. Can you repeat the same question in a little louder manner? Because I couldn't hear.
Yes, Swami, thank you. It's Reggie.
Yeah.
I asked a question. why is it that we have these dreams of being chased?
Why the dreams of being chased?
Yes, like you mentioned earlier on,
Yeah.
the lions chasing us.
Yeah. Why do we have that dream, is it?
Yes, that's right.
Because you have seen outside in the world the lion chasing and other things that is there in your memory. When you go to the dream is repeated again. Whatever you have
Okay.
seen in the outer world, you have the fear of death. So whenever you are in dream, so many things will happen. Not only the lion chasing or something, so many good things, bad things, everything happen. Whatever you see in the waking world, the same is reproduced in the dream world.
So it's all in our subconscious mind.
Yeah, it is in your subconscious mind in the form of memory. Some things may trigger it. That day you might have seen something, maybe in a movie or something, it is chasing, the lion is chasing another deer, then that may trigger that.
Okay.
The waking
Thank you
state
very
had so many things that will come in the form of dream.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Swamiji.
Okay, Om.
Om.
Any other questions? Any other doubts?
Maharaj, Pranam Maharaj, I could join
Yes, Mother.
at 10:20 like that, Maharaj. It was not very
Okay.
much delay, so I could come back after the Taishomam. The Sringeri
Okay.
Shardambal temple near
Yeah,
the house.
you told yesterday. Yes, Mother, you told yesterday. And this will be, it is recorded and it will be uploaded to our channel maybe in a week or so. Then you can hear it again, Mother.
Yes, Maharaj. But
You can
today
tell Sridhar Jagwant, who is recording now, he will be on the line, he will be hearing it. So if you ask him to do that quickly, he will do it quickly.
Okay, Maharaj.
You can request him, Sridhar Jagwant.
Thank you, Maharaj. Pranam Maharaj.
Om Mother, Pranam, Om Namo Narayana. Jai Shri. So I shall end the session now. I think we don't have any other questions or doubts. I will conclude with the prayer. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshaha Sarvayagneshwaro Harihi Tasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtam Prenite Prenitam Jagat Harihi Om Tatsat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.